Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the show. I have a very special guest with me today. Peter Rizun, I believe it is, not
Ryzen, that's right.
Rizun, of Bitcoin Unlimited, chief scientist. Welcome to the show. Welcome.
Great, thank you for having me, Colin.
I believe you are the first member of Bitcoin Unlimited. Actually, no, because I guess imaginary username is also in BU. But yeah, you're one of the first BU people in it. I had to maybe see people in before, but yeah, let's get some multiple implementations up in here. You know what I'm saying?
That's what we need, definitely.
That's definitely what we need. So yeah, we'll just jump right in. So the title of this show is Satoshi's Incentives, and so this is kind of a jumping off point of this article that you wrote about how switch screens here. What makes Satoshi's incentives work? And so
hmm
basically the incentive. I don't know if you would just want to kind of go ahead and summarize it yourself here.
Sure. So, what makes Satoshi's incentive works is open competition. So, we have this basically fixed set of rules, and then participants can compete to confirm transactions in new blocks. And when they succeed, they're awarded with new coins. So, this incentive has been a mind blowing success, at least part of the steps of running the Bitcoin network. For example, if you look at the problem of finding difficult proof of works, the original Bitcoin D client could make about 30,000 attempts at finding a difficult proof of work for every joule of energy it consumed. The latest Antminer S19 can make about 40 billion attempts for every joule of energy it consumed. So, over the span of about a decade, the technology for running one component of the network improved by over a factor of 1 million times. So, to me, it's quite mind blowing if you think about that. And that's proof that Satoshi's incentives work. And the reason it worked is because if people all over the world could think of these new ideas for more efficiently finding those difficult proof of works, and if they succeeded, they would be rewarded with more revenue for mining. So they had every incentive to do so, and it was a complete success. So Satoshi's incentive can work for developing the rest of the technology required to scale to global adoption as well.
Okay, so that's about proof of work. What you kind of go into here, and I mean, this is kind of wrapped into the whole infrastructure funding drama. Who's gonna fund the devs, right? Is that implementations are important because they do the validation of the blocks, correct? So they make sure all the transactions are correct, but there's no there's an incentive to find the block, which is the block reward, but there's not really an incentive to validate correctly. Because if I understand correctly, you mine a block, but you can just like get the block header of the previous block, so you don't actually have to check all of the transactions. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Oh, yes.
But I believe that to be a mistake. I don't think Satoshi wanted that to be possible. Like if you read section 5 of the white paper, he specifically says that the steps running the network is, step number 3 was that the miners verify all of the transactions in the block that they just received, to make sure nothing is double spent and all the signatures are valid. And only after they've verified it, then they express their acceptance of that block by mining on top of it. You see, but what happened is that as blocks became bigger and bigger, that would cost the miners more money. So if they were validating for, let's say, 6 seconds of the 600-second block interval, that's about 1% of the time that they can't be working towards finding a new block. So their revenue was about 1% lower than it could have been. So if they were still doing that, they would have a strong financial incentive to run more efficient implementations, because by running faster validating nodes, they could validate more quickly, could move on to another block more quickly, and increase their revenue. Sorry, my 8-month-old is just starting to cry, so that's distracting me.
No problem.
Uh, but instead of improving the rate at which they could validate the blocks, what they realized is that there's a shortcut. They could instead just assume that the previous block was valid and start mining a new block, a new empty block on top of that, and make just as much money as they could have as if they could validate really quickly. So that short circuited the market that would have formed for this fast validation technology.
Gotcha. And so, so there's not really, so the market to develop faster validation, I mean, that market would go towards these software implementations, the dev teams that would create the software. And so your solution here is UTXO commitments and making that more difficult, no, making the validation more difficult via UTXO commitments. Do you want to kind of explain what UTXO commitments are?
Sure. So a UTXO commitment is basically a fingerprint of all the Bitcoins that currently remain unspent. So UTXO commitments are already on the roadmap for Bitcoin Cash because they have lots of benefits in addition to making validationless mining more expensive. For example, with UTXO commitments, nodes could be brought online downloading only the UTXO set, which is around 2 or 3 gigabytes, rather than downloading the entire blockchain, which is 250 gigabytes, so 100 times bigger. So UTXO helps bootstrapping nodes, and UTXO commitments that support compact inclusion proofs would also allow the wallets that are running on our phones to validate unconfirmed Bitcoin transactions. So I thought it was just a happy little coincidence that if the UTXO commitment was designed in the correct way, it would also make validationless mining more expensive. It would force the miner to download the previous block in full, push it through his database to update his UTXO commitment, to update his UTXO set in order to calculate that fingerprint.
I see. So like when I first looked at it, I was like, wait, isn't UTXO commitments supposed to like make mining faster? But you're basically saying the UTXO commitment, since it is such a smaller set, it's basically making this market available that would previously be too big. Is that kind of an easier way to say it?
Well, so in addition to the other benefits that UTXO commitments have, it would make it harder for miners to cheat. It would make it harder for them to ignore validating the previous block and immediately start mining an empty block. So it would force them to at least update their UTXO sets, thereby increasing the cost of validationless mining. And what that means is that now the miners are going to want to be able to update their UTXO commitments as quickly as possible. And every second there, it adds up to, it works out to like several million. I calculate the numbers in my article, but it can be several $1 million a year of additional revenue for every second that they can gain a head start on starting on that next block. So by making validationless mining more costly, we create this very lucrative multi-million-dollar market for people to develop fast validation tech. And that technology is exactly what we need to scale Bitcoin to global levels anyways. So basically, it's a way to recreate the same dynamics that led to a 1 million time improvement in the efficiency of hashing technology to play out on block validation technology as well. So right now there's this, all this talk about, well, who's going to pay to scale Bitcoin? Who's going to make these more efficient implementations? Oh, are we going to reroute some of the Coinbase the Coinbase rewards to some third-party developers? Maybe we just need, more people to donate money. But all that, like the donations, I think are great and helpful, but I don't think they're even necessary. If you create the right incentives, if you create a market for fast validation technology, then people will spontaneously solve the problem just by themselves, right. For the same reasons that they made hashing 1 million times faster.
Right. So the UTXO commitments would then be like, obviously, like a consensus rule, right? Like it would have to be kind of hard forked in. Is that basically my question? Is that in each new block, then you would have to include the new UTXO commitments, correct?
Right. So
okay.
if you made it optional, it's the same problem with the IFP or the dev tax being optional. If it's optional, then the miners aren't going to do it because they can make more money by doing the validationless mining instead. So eventually, for the market to be created, you need to make it a consensus rule. But we can phase that in slowly. For example, we could just make it optional at first, so we could write it into BU, into ABC, into BCH node, and it'll just allow the miners to practice. They can get a feel for what it's like. And after 6 months or a year, when everyone kind of has a good feel for how this works, then we make that a consensus rule. And then this market I'm talking about for efficient validation really kicks off.
Gotcha. All right, I think I understand it a little bit more now. Okay. So yeah, basically you create the market. So, because like right now, I mean, we've seen there's like no like incentives for having a good implementation. Really, it's just because like you said, you could just mine an empty block, so the speed of it doesn't matter. And you kind of saw with BTC, you get the kind of corporate controlled, company sponsored dev funds, I guess. And then with BSV, you just have like completely controlling the entire protocol. So of course there's incentives for both of them, and then we're kind of in BCH still trying to figure it out. So
yeah, I mean, we want to go to a multiple implementation future, but right now that's hard because like Bitcoin Unlimited can validate blocks quite quickly. We have parallel validation and we have some other efficiency improvements, but that's not enough for the miners to run Bitcoin Unlimited because it doesn't directly increase their bottom lines. Like, so if you could change the protocol slightly to be more economically rational, to incentivize, basically, so that if an implementation makes objective improvements, that miners can earn more money by running that improved implementation, well, that incentivizes the work we want to do, which is making these high performance implementations.
Gotcha. So yeah, so BU as a mining node, you kind of got into it a little bit. So right now, a majority of the miners run ABC, and as I understand, it's just because just in case there's some random quirk between the different implementations, they don't want to be orphaned off, basically. And so it's kind of like everybody just runs the same one just to be safe. And so you think kind of putting this UTXO commitment as consensus basically is kind of a way to spur different mining nodes?
So right now there's this winner take all dynamic where all the miners want to be running the same implementation as all the other miners, so they get this bug for bug compatibility. But if they could run a different implementation and earn more money by doing so, well, at a certain point, the risk of generating an out of consensus block is small compared to the extra revenue they can earn by validating more quickly. So at a certain point, the profit motive is going to get them to switch. But right now, because whether they run, like if all the miners run a really slow node, like I could, hey guys, I created this implementation that's now, it's 100 times faster than the implementation you're currently running. Please run it. They would say, well, Peter, why should I run it? I would be like, well, it improves decentralization. But they don't care about that. They want to say, no, it makes me 1% more revenue per year. But right now, I can't say that to them. I can say, yeah, this node is way better. It's way faster. But they'll be like, but it doesn't matter. We can do validationless mining instead. So it's very hard to break into the mining market, even if you're objectively better with your node implementation. I want to change that.
Gotcha. Yeah, makes sense. So, and yeah, the bug for bug, I guess I haven't heard that word before, but yeah, that kind of makes sense. Oh, we all have this bug. Let's figure it out together, or rather than, well, I have this bug, you don't. Yeah. One question I have. Is there any updates on the Lightning Network?
Is it still around? I haven't thought about it for almost a year.
No, I don't think anybody's really using it. So, all right. So, I guess we might as well talk about the IFP a little bit more. So, IFP first comes out. It first hits G-Hang's proposal, 12.5%, or you get orphaned. What was your first thoughts?
Well, I didn't really know what to think at first. I was kind of, just kind of processing it. But the more I thought about it, the more I disliked it. And I eventually got to the point where I hated it. It seemed antithetical to the very essence of Bitcoin. It was a proposal to encode a third party into the protocol. Bitcoin is all about decentralization. It's supposed to be permissionless. There's no third parties in the protocol, but this would change it. So yeah, the more I thought about it, the more I disliked it, and now I'm at the point where I think creating such an IFP would kill Bitcoin Cash.
So I mean, so that argument comes up, a third party, and then they say, well, they took out the Hong Kong corporation. They're like, well, you can just donate to somebody on the whitelist. Thoughts about the whitelist?
Well, I don't see it any better because there's still third parties encoded into protocol. Yeah. I mean, one of the appeals of Bitcoin to me was it was decentralized and permissionless, and it was different than the monetary system we had. Like right now, we used to say that Bitcoin's monetary policy was known decades in advance, and fiscal policy was impossible. But the dev tax is basically fiscal policy. It's basically some group saying we need to repurpose some of these new coins away from the creator of the block and to this third-party Hong Kong corporation or to these developers for this greater social good of doing this development work that may or may not improve Bitcoin. And what's worse is they get paid not after they do the work, like a miner gets paid, but before they do the work. And where's the accountability here? Yeah. Like, to me, it's worse than the current monetary system. At least, with taxes, I feel that there's oversight and there's accountability. With this, it's like what checks and balances are there?
Yeah, because then it's like, well, who gets to be on the whitelist? Who decides if they're doing a good job, right? The people on the whitelist get to decide who stays on the whitelist. Right? It's crazy. Yeah.
Like, why? If you're not on the whitelist and you want to develop, why would you do it? How can you compete with the developers that are paid by the protocol itself? And even if you did come up with something crazy cool, the people on the whitelist have every incentive to downplay it to make it appear that they're serving some great purpose and deserve their continued feeding from this public trough that they've created.
Mm-hmm. So, is there any? I know we might as well get to the heart of it. Have you had like any personal issues with Omri? I mean, I've always had positive interactions. I've seen him attack other people for not being in lines. Is there anything you kind of want to share about this? And if not, it's fine.
No, I don't have any personal issues. I guess what I've seen really clearly over the last month is just how different my ideology for Bitcoin is to Murray Sachet's ideology for Bitcoin. Like back in 2013, when I got into Bitcoin, we used to talk about, attacks, how development might be taken over by someone who would eventually add a protocol rule to reroute new coins into their own wallet. And we would scream like, oh, that would be like the worst thing ever. But that's basically what he's proposing to do. So the fact that he somehow thinks that's a good thing and is in line with the spirit of Bitcoin blows my mind, because it's so radically not Bitcoin to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I absolutely agree. I mean, like when it first came out myself, I was kind of like, oh, we're providing a solution that's good, but this Hong Kong corporation's weird. And then I kind of like thought about it more and more, sat on it, and I was like, this is like literally changing the economics of Bitcoin, like at a fundamental level, like literally like. And then it's just so hypocritical, I feel, to complain about Blockstream limiting the block size, and then you go do this. like that's changing economics. No, this literally is. So, it's kind of sad.
It's worse than Blockstream.
Yeah, I mean, it really, like, imagine if this was proposed on BTC, like it would never. I mean, it would never happen.
We would make fun of them so bad.
Exactly. Even BSV, be like, I mean, I don't think we'd be surprised, but it'd still be like, oh, classic BSV, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, even though they're the only ones mining it, so they are getting the whole Coinbase thing. But anyways, I mean, there was talk about how the miners, Jihang and Jihan, actually wanted something like this for a while now, for a couple of years, something like Coinbase going to devs. Do you have kind of any knowledge about some type of Coinbase going to devs talk before this came out?
No, that there has been talk over the years about this idea. I mean, it's tempting, right? Like, basically, the network is printing money every 10 minutes. So the idea that you could just repurpose a bit of that money for some social good is tempting. It was shot down a couple years ago, and I hope it gets shot down this time. I think we're shooting it down. But
Thanks, Dave. Yeah,
it's not a new idea, but
yeah.
I think it'll always be coming back because it's so tempting just to try to take some of those new coins for some purpose other than what it was originally intended for, which is running the network.
Yeah, and do you think it's kind of like a cultural divide too? I mean, I know China's like more communist than the West. Do you think it's kind of something like, oh, this is okay because it's a public good, or do you think that's kind of a thought?
I don't think so. I think that the miners, I think it was more pressure from devs, in particular ABC, and I know Donald Fuchball, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, but he's claimed, or he's admitted on Reddit that he was a big pusher in getting Jiang Zhuer to make the IFP proposal. So I don't think it came from the miners. I think it came from devs who wanted secure funding to continue working, so they didn't have to compete in the open market like how I think Bitcoin was meant to be developed.
Yeah. Donald actually has since come out completely against it. I don't know if you've seen his updates on that, but yeah, I think it was mainly just because the huge backlash. I don't think he expected that, but yeah, maybe I'll get him on the show sometime. So yeah, everybody's kind of backtracking. ABC has it hard coded into their software now, or I guess it's hard coded for BIP9 if the BIP9 voting works. Do you want to kind of talk about BIP9? Does it work on a minority chain, especially?
I like the idea of BIP9. I like it on BTC on the majority chain, and I like it at a 90% threshold. But I don't really see it as a way to vote. I see it more like, okay, we're confident that the network wants to introduce this protocol change, and BIP9 is a way for everybody to signal their readiness. So it's more like this coordination scheme that we can use in this decentralized world, so that miners don't risk orphaning their blocks. The way it's being run on Bitcoin ABC is quite different. First, they haven't used a 95% threshold. They used a 67% threshold. So it's a lot easier to trigger. And that would be bad enough if we were the majority chain, but we're also the minority chain with 3% of the hash rate of BTC. So it's very easy for one large BTC miner to come over and activate it just to troll us and to try to create a network split. So I think using BIP9 at a 67% threshold is reckless.
Yeah, gotcha. Yeah, I mean, miner voting, miner signaling never really seemed to work because weren't a ton of miners signaling for big blocks too back in the day. Even on BTC, before BCH happened. I don't know. It just never seemed like. I mean, you're supposed to vote with your blocks, and which chain you mine on. I don't. To me, it just seems like the voting has been tried and just never been successful. So,
I don't know if I agree with that.
Yeah.
I think BIP9 was successful for the most part on BTC. I think it broke down. I think the 1 megabyte block size limit didn't get fixed, but it never went to a BIP9 vote or a BIP135 vote. I think if Core had actually, it coded a protocol change to increase the block size limit, I think it would have been activated and I think that would because it seemed like there was community support for bigger blocks at the time, and it was just that it was basically course control over the reference implementation that prevented it from moving forward. I don't think it was the miners that prevented it.
Gotcha. Uh, let's see. As this IFP is kind of going on, ABC obviously had it in their code, and then Bitcoin Cash Note happened, which basically just forked ABC and took out the IFP completely. And they said that their software will follow the longest chain regardless of IFP or not. How likely do you think a split is?
Nobody wants to split. Like we didn't. I didn't want to split from BTC. I didn't want to split from BSV. And right now, splits are failures. They're failures of proof of work. Everybody wants to stay together, and I really hope that through the efforts of BCH Node and through the miners seeing that there's community outrage over this idea, that they won't activate it, and we won't have a split. That being said, the fact that ABC hasn't pulled it out does worry me because, they are the de facto reference implementation, and a lot of exchanges and miners just run them by default. So there's still a risk here. That would be sad if a split happened. But I think, moving forward, we need to move to a multi-implementation world so this kind of thing can't happen again. We have to kill the idea of the dominant reference client that all of the exchanges and miners run.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Everybody's harping on decentralization all the time, but BCH has been around for 2.5 years, and we've still only had one really reference implementation. So, now that talking to you and after reading your article, that's having the validation be competition seems like the way to have the node competition. It's very interesting to say the least. So, let's see what else I got here. So Bitcoin Cash Node. How do you see the future of Bitcoin Cash Node?
I'm encouraged. I fully support the idea, and I think it makes sense because it's an alternative to ABC that's identical to ABC in every way except for the IFP. So that bug for bug compatibility problem I talked about earlier that makes miners hesitant to run BU or BCHD, that doesn't exist as much with BCH Node. So I think that's good. But what we don't want to have happen is for all the miners to abandon ABC and all migrate over to BCH Node and have the same problem, 6 months down the road, where again, we're now using this new node implementation, but it's the same centralization around one dev team and one common reference implementation. So we need to solve the systemic problem, which is the incentives which are not quite aligned, that keep failing to create multiple implementations, and instead have this recurring theme where it's always one reference implementation, one dev team. Most of the miners are running that, and that's the central point of control, the central point of failure. And we saw with BTC, with Core's refusal to increase the block size limit, despite widespread community support for bigger blocks. And we saw it with ABC, trying to sneak in a protocol rule that would divert Coinbase from the creator of the block into basically Amari Sachet's wallet.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. Yeah. It's there's never been multiple mining nodes in any Bitcoin, so it's got to figure that out for sure. I will agree with you there. So here's a question. BU seems to be active, then passive, then active, and then very active as of late. Why?
I'm not sure I follow.
This is from a question from Kelso. Basically, it seems maybe you guys just aren't always doing proof of social media all the time.
Yeah, I mean we're always working. I would say that the development activity is always really strong. We have lots of full-time people working every day, lots of activities in our private development channels. But no, I mean when something happens like the IFP proposal, it gets people talking. So you hear more from Bitcoin Unlimited during times like that because we want to use what influence we do have to, help steer the network in the direction we think it should go.
Gotcha. Makes sense. I think we ran through everything already that I kind of had on. I'm sure I can think of something else real quick. Is there something else you wanna add at the moment? Let's see what else we got here.
Well, one thing is the difference between the protocol and implementations of the protocol. I think that's I think that distinction needs to be more clear in our community and appreciated. And I think that is one of the key things that we need to move away from this reference client monoculture to this world of competing implementations.
Because like so often the implementation has just been tied to the protocol because there is only one. So I guess my question is how is BU different than ABC structurally, kind of organizational wise, and then also from a technical standpoint? What are some differences?
Well, from a technical standpoint, we've been working for I think 5 years now, improving the scalability of the Bitcoin Unlimited client, whereas ABC was forked from Bitcoin Core at a much later date, and they haven't been doing the same sort of research and development as BU towards scaling. For the most part, they backport the changes from Core and don't do much innovation, especially with respect to scaling on their own. And that's not meant as a critique. There's a good reason for doing that. It's just that Core, even though we might not like Core, we might hate the idea of the 1 megabyte block size limit. Core being such a mature implementation does have the best quality control. So staying very close to Bitcoin Core is helpful for not accidentally introducing bugs, being able to port over all of the security patches, and keeping quality high. But that comes at the cost of scalability because we know that Core doesn't care about 20 megabyte blocks. They definitely don't care about gigabyte blocks. So they're not going to do the work needed to scale. So that's the downside for ABC staying close to Core, where Bitcoin Unlimited does not follow Core.
Okay, so you guys don't really do that backporting as much then?
No, I mean if there's a security fix that affects BU, obviously we follow that. But no, it's BU has separated from Core a long time ago. We've cut our cords with Core, and that's freed us up to do these great things like parallel validation at Xtin and other innovations for scaling.
Sure. So one controversy that's kind of been going on is the 25 chain transaction unconfirmed limits. And I know ABC is saying they're going to raise it to 50 on the next one, but BU kind of put out a solution to this, if I'm not mistaken. But the counter was that if this is implemented, then ABC can no longer backport from Core. Is that correct?
I mean, that was one of their hesitations to adopt our solution. It would make it harder to backport from Core. Yeah, I guess there's some truth to that. I don't know. To me, I didn't find the argument too compelling. But the whole unconfirmed transaction limit is it kind of drives me crazy because the reason there's an inefficiency at all is because of ABC's child pays for parent algorithm. So basically, when new transactions are coming in, the ABC node is looking at any child transaction, paid a higher fee, which would allow the parent transaction to jump in the queue to be confirmed in the next block. But in Bitcoin Cash, mempool is cleared every new block anyways because their blocks aren't full. So the entire premise behind child pays for parent is, it makes sense on Bitcoin Core. It doesn't really make sense on Bitcoin Cash. So the insistence of keeping that feature and allowing that child pays for parent feature to hold back, moving to longer mempool chains, which many people in the Bitcoin Cash industry wanted, it didn't sit right with me.
Gotcha. And so, what was you that's kind of the main brain behind solving this? Can you kind of go into that a little bit?
Okay, so This gets subtle. So there is nothing to solve if you don't use child pays for
Okay.
parent. So the original Bitcoin Unlimited client didn't use child pays for parent. So there was no limit to the amount of mempool chaining at all. Clients like BCHD, they don't use child pays for parent because it's not necessary in Bitcoin Cash. And if you don't use child pays for parent, then there is no issue with the long chains. However, ABC really wanted to use child pays for parent. So what Peter Schipper did is he said, well, I'm going to find some ways to tweak the algorithm so it can run more efficiently. So he found a way to do it, which worked out to be like 100 times more efficient than the existing child pays for parent algorithm. Basically, as a favor, being like, okay, ABC, like here's an algorithm that'll be faster, so you can still use child pays for parent if you want, but no, they still didn't want to use it.
Gotcha. So somebody comments that child pays for parent helps for where there are mistakes with fees made with parent transactions. Do you see this as a big enough problem to keep CPFP in?
Not really, because I mean, if the parent transaction doesn't pay the minimum relay fee, it's not going to really relay across the network anyways. And if it does pay the minimum relay fee, it's probably going to get confirmed in the next block. So no, I don't see that as a good reason for child pays for parent.
Gotcha. So
and I should use this as a jumping off point for to promote multiple implementations again. So, if we had more decentralization in the implementations, if miners were running ABC, BU, BCHD, all of that, and if there was demand for longer mempool chains, well, those longer mempool chains are going to have fees attached to them. So the miners are going to, want to be confirming these longer mempool chains. And if ABC is slow, then that's another reason for the miners to switch to an implementation that's faster at evaluating those mempool chains. So this is another positive market feedback, which would encourage the miners to run the best implementation for solving the problem. But because we have this implementation monoculture, ABC could basically say, no, we're slow at validating long mempool chains. So rather than competing, we're just going to, keep this rule that limits it to 25 so that we can still compete. Because if the limit, like if you just increase the limit to 1,000, well, now the miners would have a real profit incentive to switch to an implementation that's faster at processing those long chains. And again, I see that as a good thing. Like I want to have, I want to remove limits to the extent that that's possible to encourage competition, like this competition I'm talking about right now.
Gotcha. So I guess my question now is, if there was multiple limitations and say ABC is limited to 25, and then a BU node say has a chain of 100, is that consensus rules? Like if the BU node mined the 100, I know it's like a mempool sync issue, which is never a good thing itself, but is it actual like consensus? Is there going to be a fork because there's more transactions in the mempool, or kind of like how'd that work out?
Right, it's not a consensus. So the miners, they could increase the transactions if they really wanted to, but there's a lot of fuss about this, that it would create some insecurities for zero conf. There's a bit of truth in that, but yeah, it's not a consensus rule, to answer your question.
Gotcha. So John will just actually brought up something. He said that the only consideration for CPFP, there was also the entire data flow presents a quadratic situation when considering if something is valid. So I would assume, like, as the chain gets longer and longer, it's kind of exponential. Is that kind of one of the problems with the mempool chains?
Right. Well, that's a problem with ABC's implementation of CP child pays for parent.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha.
Right?
So,
but this gets down to my point. Like we want to have like a stable, largely unchanging, economically rational protocol and then we have implementations competing to best implement that protocol. But the fact that they even do child pays for parent is not part of the protocol. That's something they choose to do, and the fact that their implementation of that is slow and hurts the miners that are running their implementation, that should be a problem that they should face market consequences for. But because they have such control in this winner-take-all dynamic of the mining market, that they don't. So you don't have this the free market dynamic that punishes those slower implementations.
I see. All right, I think I follow you now. It's all right. We're learning about Bitcoin here. All right. Okay. Switching gears a little bit. So here's one. So say the IFP does get voted on and activated with 67% signaling. What's your plan?
I don't know. It would break my heart, really. It would. I had a hard time with the BSV split. I thought that really set us back, and this would, I think there would be a chain split, and it would set us back even further. And I just hope it doesn't happen. I don't know what I would do at this point.
Yeah. Yeah, it's one of those things like, please don't happen. I don't even want to think about the possibility. Hashtag no split. Let's see. So I know like the kind of the ideal situation for you is multiple node implementations and UTXO commitments is kind of a route to that. The service Flipstarter. What do you think about that? I'll kind of sum it up real quick. Basically, it's like Kickstarter, but you can commit funds non-custodially, and the project isn't funded unless the entire project is funded. Do you have any thoughts on this?
I think it's great. I think it's awesome. I think something like that would be really useful for funding initiatives that are difficult to fund otherwise. The community can pitch in money, and you know that if you pitch in money, it's only going to be committed if enough funds are raised to actually carry out the project. It's a great way to raise funds. But again, that's in addition to the idea that we want to create a economically rational protocol that incentivizes the work that needs to be done to scale Bitcoin, regardless of any community donations. Community donations should just be a bonus, and for doing the things that no companies really want to do anyways. We want for the core protocol to be able to scale just based on people following their rational self-interest, businesses trying to make money.
Sure. Yeah. So you don't think it's like long-term sustainable?
No, I got to be careful here. I think a project like that is long-term sustainable for funding, niche projects or unique projects that might not have a lot of market value or business value. But no, I don't think it makes sense as the primary mechanism for funding the technology we need to scale Bitcoin to global levels. I think for that, we need competing implementations, and we need a protocol such that if you're running a faster implementation, the miners will earn more money. So we need a direct profit incentive for people to build those faster implementations.
Got you. Makes sense. Oh God, I just had another question. Then just let me. How was your day?
It was not bad. It was raining here in Vancouver today, so
man, it's been raining in Atlanta. Yeah. It's been raining in Atlanta for like 3 days straight, and man, ooh-wee. Let's see.
Yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to the sunshine. It's been a wet January and February here in Vancouver.
Yes, same in Atlanta, other side of the continent, but yes, same here. So let's see. Does anybody else in chat have some questions while we're here? So let's see what else we got here. You got any questions for me?
What do you think about the IFP?
Hashtag no tax, man. Yeah, I don't know. I think I kind of said it already, but it's just it literally. I mean, like I know it's kind of almost cliche to say after the whole BSV thing, but like you changing the economics of Bitcoin,
Hmm.
especially like that was originally said by SVers when it was related to like CTOR, and
Yeah.
I couldn't follow that. And then, but this literally moves money from one person to somebody else, so it literally changes the economics. So yeah, it's no good. It doesn't seem like peer to peer cash. I don't know. It's just kind of like it's funny because imaginary username. He's like a guy I look up to. I met him once in Australia, but he's just a very smart guy, always reasonable headed. He was the one of the first guys to see you two with the, calling out Craig Wright when he kind of tried to weasel his way into BCH, and then he was like very against it like that, and then so I was like kind of because at first you're just like, oh yeah, this is gonna be great. We're gonna fund the devs. It's gonna be great. And then
Yeah.
you see him being like a complete rejection of it, and you're just like, wait a minute, something else is going on here. And then you just kind of sit on it for a while, and you're just like, yeah, this sucks.
But
So
yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think a lot of people felt that way. People, well, it kind of makes sense. Yeah. And the fact that, yeah, you are maybe taking a bit of profit away from BTC miners, that's kind of tempting. But yeah, I think the community as a whole, the longer we sat with it, the more we realized that, that's not Bitcoin. That doesn't work.
yeah. Somebody says the IFP doesn't change the economics of the change any more than each halvening. Well, the halvening was already planned out, so it don't matter. And so here's one: any work on storage optimization in BU?
Yeah, we have some cool things coming up. I'm not going to say them now, but yeah, in the next month or so, I expect to hear some what I think will be interesting news on storage.
Cool. Sounds good. Can't wait. What are your thoughts on Avalanche?
I don't like Avalanche.
Please explain.
I mean, Avalanche, to me, it's for it to have any teeth, it has to supersede proof of work. But then, what's the point of proof of work? And if it, doesn't have any teeth, then what's the point of Avalanche? So, what I do like the idea of some form of pre-consensus, though. My favorite right now is the protocol called Storm by Many, uh, and it's a weak block scheme. So basically, miners are always looking for these difficult proof of works, basically a block header where the hash starts with a bunch of leading zeros. Every once in a while, they find, a block header that'll have a hash with, not quite as many leading zeros as they need to make a valid block. So we call these weak blocks. So the idea is Storm is the miners can recycle this waste product. They can propagate these weak blocks as kind of a pre-announcement of what's coming. So this allows miners to sync their mempool and build the block, incrementally, step by step, over the course of the 600-second block interval. On Many's proposal, they were sending out weak blocks with an average time of 600 milliseconds. So these weak blocks are coming really quickly, and once your transaction is included in the weak block, you have some. Well, I wouldn't say you're not guaranteed that it'll be in the next block, but it increases the confidence that it will be in the next block compared to just a regular unconfirmed Bitcoin transaction.
Gotcha. Yeah, because I mean the whole zero conf argument is Bitcoin's a game of it's a game of chance. Chance isn't the right word. Risk something. It's not absolute, right? Nothing's absolute.
Yeah, it's a game of risk management, I would
Right.
say.
Right. So here's a random question. Do you go to Robson Street in Vancouver? Do you know what that is? I don't know.
Yeah, I do know what Robson Street. Yes, everybody in Vancouver knows Robson Street. Why do they ask?
That's the question. I don't know. Is it?
I don't know. Does this person like me or not? Like, I'm kind of scared now.
Okay, it's one of those streets. uh, so here's a little more serious. What happens to ABC after all this? Can it survive?
I don't know. I think it can. I mean, I've lost confidence in ABC personally. I think what they've done is reckless, and I wouldn't be disappointed if ABC loses full influence. Um, but the reality is that their position as the dominant reference implementation is incredibly powerful. Like, all of us that are watching, this talk right now, following Reddit, following Twitter, we know what's going on. We're all outraged about the IFP, but a lot of the Bitcoin community is so much bigger than that. A lot of people, they check the news every couple months, and so just the fact that ABC is the de facto, in a way, ABC defines the protocol in a certain sense. That gives them tremendous power. So yeah, I'm not convinced that they will lose as much influence as I think a lot of the people paying attention closely feel that they deserve to lose.
Gotcha. You got to answer this one fast. Logo color for BCH, orange or green?
Green.
Yes. Okay. What are your thoughts on the difficulty adjustment algorithm / proposed DAAs?
I think we need to fix the DAA. I mean, this gets into more drama, but the problems we're seeing today with the difficulty adjustment algorithm and miners, coming back and forth and causing these oscillations, this was known ahead of time when the algorithm was put in place. Like Tom Harding, QPChan, Andrew Stone, they had simulators that already demonstrated these oscillations. So we knew this was going to happen ahead of time. But again, I think this is just a failure of the reference implementation, how much power they have to push through changes that aren't in the best interest of Bitcoin Cash. So I'm not surprised that we're seeing oscillations now. I think we do need to fix it. I like Tom Harding's RTT proposal. I think that might be a little bit too radical for the community to buy. I also like the exponential moving average proposal. I think that'll, that doesn't totally fix the problem. It's very hard to totally fix the problem because we're a minority chain. But I think the exponential moving average algorithm will do a good enough job that the oscillations mostly go away. So hopefully we see some progress on that for the November hard fork. But then hopefully we move away from this 6-month hard fork schedule. Like we really got to do that.
Yeah, you think like a year would be better, or any schedule?
No, I don't think we need this hard fork schedule. Why do we need to have this timestamp where we must hard fork on this date? Like the protocol is largely ready to scale to wherever we need to scale to today. Like we don't need to be making all these protocol changes, and I think I don't think it's good. It just creates drama, it creates controversy, it creates opportunities to have chain splits. I would like to see them called off and only having protocol upgrades when there's something important and when we have consensus for that.
Gotcha. So first we need a high five. Oh, turn to the side. Turn to the side. Other way. It's me.
I feel like I'm not going to be very good at this.
All right, ready? Psh, psh. All right, nice five. All right. All right.
That was very weird because it's all like weird. I'm holding my hand the opposite way I think I should be.
Mike Komaransky says, ask him if he feels bad that Mike Komaransky voted to convert BTC to BCH at the best possible level and he voted against. Damn it, Mike.
Damn it, Mike.
He said, look at the size of those hands. Yes, big hands. Okay, I think we're going to wrap it up here. We're coming up on an hour. Is there anything else you would like to add before we wrap it up here?
I guess just my message is what makes Satoshi's incentive work is open competition. For that to work, we need a stable, largely unchanging, economically rational protocol upon which implementations can compete for market share. So that's what we have to do for Bitcoin Cash to succeed.
Gotcha. I will agree. Let's make these multiple implementations happen. Let's do it. So I think that's the number one most pressing thing that I think everybody's kind of learning from this whole IFP thing. So yeah. So anyways, thank you so much, Peter. I hope everybody enjoyed the show. And
thank you.
Thank you all for watching.
Awesome. I had fun. Thanks.
Cheers.